House of the Dragon, Season 1. What a masterpiece. The writing, the casting, the performances, just a fantastic job from a fan scorned by Season 8. Casual fans, show-only fans, book zealots, there was something for everyone. The deeply layered conflict, intertwining storylines, and great characters. It got me thinking, like the internet psychopath that I am, where to point the finger. Who is responsible for the Dance of Dragons? It's not an easily answered question. However, there are gradients and levels of responsibilities subject to interpretation. So, after some thought, I compiled a top 10 list of those deviants most responsible for the upcoming Targaryen Civil War, known as the Dance of Dragons. Starting off, there is a short list of those that I refuse to assign blame to. The Maesters? Lack of any dialogue or evidence of the Maester conspiracy, though it is still a compelling theory. Secondly, Rhaenyra Velaryon. It is what it is. The fact that he even attempted to sire an heir places him above all reproach, and I will explain later in this list. Rhaenys Velaryon. She had the ability to end the Greens completely. However, she held no responsibility to act. She swore no oath. Unprovoked kinslaying is inexcusable from her point of view. And lastly, Lady Royce's horse. Yeah, it's just a horse, although its stumble had lasting butterfly effects. Number 10. Harold Westerling. Tyrion Lannister made it very clear in Season 2 that the Hand of the King has little to no authority over the Kingsguard. After Criston Cole's murder of Lord Beesbury, our Lord Commander ordered Cole to disarm himself, an order Westerling refused to enforce. Cole should have been sentenced to death immediately, not necessarily for the Beesbury murder. A trial probably would have been more appropriate, given one could argue that it was an accident. Maybe. But his immediate death sentence should have been for disobeying the Lord Commander Westerling. If Cole would have been dispatched, Westerling would have been the only armed man in the small council chamber. All Greens could have been arrested or executed, leaving Aegon to himself and not likely to press his claim. One could argue that Rhaenys Targaryen was in a similar position and could have executed all of the Greens. However, I would argue that Rhaenys was under no oath or obligation, other than the oath to Rhaenyra that her husband took on behalf of his house, which is the sole reason Rhaenys Velaryon will not appear on this list. Number 9. Lucerys Velaryon. It would be difficult to hold a 14-year-old responsible for his actions, yet here he is. It is understandable that children tease each other, no matter the age. It's even likely a younger child could contribute to the bullying if, under the umbrella of the eldest or strongest of the group. Please forgive the pun. Anyways, Lucerys felt emboldened to tease Aemond, likely due to the support of Aegon II. For that, I would not hold him responsible. Where I will place the blame is the snigger he displayed when the pig was placed in front of Aemond at the Viserys' Last Supper. Regardless of the pig being placed in front of Aemond, was at Luke's direction or not. As glasses were being raised and relationships mended, I would put the responsibility on Luke for not formally apologizing to Aemond for the one event that was likely to cause the largest rift between the family branches. Lastly, the fact that Lucerys did not immediately leave Storm's End the instant he saw Vhagar parked outside. Nothing good was going to happen. Luke should have known he had nothing to offer other than the Lord Boros' father's words. Some could call his refusal to leave as bravery, but a fine line separates that from stupidity. Lastly, his control over his dragon, who technically did strike first. I firmly believe the dragon reacts based on the rider's emotions. A dragon sensing calm would then respond to verbal commands. How else could Vhagar understand when his own rider, Laena, commit suicide be her own dragon's fire? Since it would be unreasonable to expect that level of emotional calm from a 14-year-old, Lucerys Velaryon is near the bottom of this list. Number 8. Sir Criston Cole. I absolutely refuse to lay anything but equal blame for the short romantic relationship between Rhaenyra and Cole, and will not elaborate further. That being said, the events following get a bit murkier. Cole's naive behavior and selfishness in asking Rhaenyra to refuse her birthright, and subsequent grudge-holding, it is his responsibility alone. His pathetic attempt to scrap together some level of honor and placing that decision solely on Rhaenyra's shoulders is the very definition of narcissism and immaturity. His confession to Queen Alicent could have been out of guilt, or cowardice. Either way, it was self-serving, and nowhere near the noble act Criston thought it was. This action was the final straw that turned Alicent against Rhaenyra, and led to the donning of the infamous green dress. Alicent would likely never forgive Rhaenyra after the Cole confession, but that will be addressed later in this video. Finally, Cole's treatment of the next generation in the training yards. His distaste for Rhaenyra filtered down to her young, and Cole was ever eager to punish the boys for her mother's perceived transgressions. This was disgusting for a second reason as well, as it festered resentment between the boys who had no reason to dislike each other. His actions were poisonous venom that infected otherwise innocent parties at the time. Number 7. Aemond Targaryen. Okay, calm down, Blondie. As far as dragon bonding goes, headcanon of my own is that the dragon will bond with a rider only when that rider commits to that exclusive dragon. If a rider wants a dragon so badly, he'll settle for any one of them. The dragon is not likely to commit. Like anyone entering a relationship. Are you more likely to commit to another person who specifically wants to be with you, or wants to be with anybody, or anyone? As Tyrion once told us, dragons are smarter than men, according to some maesters. Therefore, I believe Aemond failing in hatching or bonding with a dragon, while he was young, of course, this led him to being singled out. A small scruff between the children is not likely to bring lifelong grudges, until weapons become involved. Not with permanent maiming considered, grudges are likely to deepen. Aemond being the first to brandish a weapon after claiming Vhagar slightly tilts the scales of blame in his direction in my humble opinion, but only slightly. I must credit Aemond for diffusing the tension later in the episode by informing his mother it was a fair trade, which is why I didn't place him inside the top 5. The grudge holding culminated at Storm's End, where Aemond made the conscious decision to torment Lucerys and chase him to the point of panic. This is likely the events that starts the dance, but responsibility leading up to this point rests on the shoulders of those much older than Aemond, and supposedly more mature than 19 years of old, wielding the power of a god. Fast forward to Viserys' Last Supper. Aemond's overreaction to Luke's snigger was out of place, though I'm sure some would disagree. I think Aemond failing to read the room, when Alicent and Rhaenyra had a genuine reconciliation in my opinion. His toast to the strong boys clearly communicated one absolute fact. The resentment between these two families had now grown beyond the petty disagreements between their mothers, which both remain higher on this list. Number 6. Daemon Targaryen. Such a Shakespearean tragedy, quick to judge, quick to action, unacceptable levels of comfort with violence. His benevolent side speaks to his loyalty to his brother, his desire for their house to remain strong, and his willingness to serve, various council posts, city watch, and warfare outside the blessings of his brother, the king. The downside, his willingness to tilt his moral compass in order to serve his definition of the greater good. The corruption and exposure of his niece accomplished nothing but weaken her claim and call into question her virtue, up until her relationship with Sir Criston. His comments regarding the death of his infant nephew I believe to be taken out of context, or lied about completely, given these words are never technically spoken in the show. His murder of Lady Royce, no doubt, benefited him in the end, but as Edmure Tully reminded us in Season 3,
The laws of gods and men are very clear. No man can compel another man to marry.
so who could have the social currency with Daemon to compel him to marry a woman he did not choose? Likely he agreed to win favor with his brother, the king. Rhaenyra's mother was an Arryn. The crown already had the loyalty of the Vale. Why Daemon marry Lady Royce is beyond me. Lastly, let me remind everyone of the mercy scene between the Hound and Arya. Arya's refusal to put the Hound out of his misery was widely considered to be an extremely cold decision. Rewind back to Lady Royce. Once paralyzed, Daemon turned his back on her to leave her, much like Arya. She antagonized him, encouraged him to kill her, knowing that pleading was not likely to convince him. One could argue killing her was an act of mercy, regardless if he took pleasure in it or not. Reading my thoughts aloud, I must sound like a total simp for Daemon, but I cannot look past his corruption of Rhaenyra for his own selfish means, and these actions allowed the Greens to put their foot in the door and question her claim. Possibly his greatest transgression. He murdered an innocent man in order to secure Sir Laenor's escape. While more merciful than murdering Sir Laenor, Daemon's actions either directly or indirectly led to the perceived death of both Rhaenys and Corlys' children. We'll just gloss over the attacking under the white flag. All's fair in love and war, I guess.
He can keep his tongue.
Thanks, Daemon. You're alright. Number 5. Rhaenyra Targaryen. Perhaps you're asking why she is lower on this list than Alicent, and that's a valid question. I struggled with these two, because I believe the top three characters to be obvious. It comes down to three factors, in my humble opinion. First, their thirst for power. Rhaenyra never sought power and authority until she was named the heir. Even then, all she sought was that which was rightfully hers by decree. Alicent did seek power, but for allegedly benevolent reasons. Alicent simply wanted her children to survive, a thought placed into her concern by her father. Secondly, how they conduct themselves as mothers. Rhaenyra never encouraged or prepared her children for war or conflict, in direct contrast to Alicent, who brutalized her son into perceiving eventual conflict. Lastly, Rhaenyra's toast to Alicent at Viserys' Last Supper. Rhaenyra took the lead, and Alicent accepted. I believe these were both genuine and honest words from both ladies. That being said, one could blame Rhaenyra for sleeping with Sir Criston, a non-issue in the modern day, as explained by Rhaenyra herself when confronted. Again, only due to Sir Criston's selfish confession was Alicent even aware of Rhaenyra's indiscretion, something Alicent very easily could have looked past. One could also hold Rhaenyra responsible for her choice in affairs. A greater effort could have been placed in finding a father who was more closely resembled to Laenor. I'll admit, speaking of Laenor, I just want to point out the effort made by him to avert this war. Let's put it into perspective. Imagine as a modern-day straight male, that in order to secure your inheritance, you must have a sexual relationship with another straight male, just to slightly increase your chances of achieving your inheritance. And not a one-time event either, but perhaps hundreds of times. No modern-day individual would agree to those terms, so the fact that Laenor made an effort to produce an heir with Rhaenyra is worthy of extreme admiration. However, the fact that Rhaenyra is attempting to pass off bastards as heirs to the Iron Throne is regrettable, and ensures her placement on this list. Number 4. Alicent Hightower. I will pull no punches. Alicent wanted no part of the succession, or to be part of any Targaryen crisis. She did her duty. She followed her father's direction without argument, and married the king without verbal objection. She did not spy on Rhaenyra, but came across the information. Her distaste is understandable, with her childhood friend given her position of not having a say in her own relationships. However, why should she care? Because it's unfair. It's a very immature response to barbaric traditions and expectations. Rather than hold the system responsible, she holds Rhaenyra personally responsible for injustices done to her. Alicent believed her best friend was a threat to her children, based on a recently scorned opinion of her father. Rather than discuss these concerns with Rhaenyra, she takes Otto at his word. Why? More green grudge holding, I guess. Oh, let's not forget she bared steel against the heir to the throne. As a person who married into the royal family, a transgression that should have resulted in her death. Alicent pursued authority she was not entitled to, unlike Rhaenyra. She trained her sons to treat the Strongs as threats from an early age, without justification. Once Viserys was incapacitated, Rhaenyra should have been recalled to assume the throne, rather than assume this authority herself. Again, Alicent refused, likely due to the influence of her father. This distaste festered, as evident by Alicent's refusal to marry Helaena to Jace, another perfectly acceptable solution to a complicated problem. Unfortunately for Alicent, reconciliation was possible for the sake of Viserys during the Last Supper. However, Alicent's paranoia had now seeped into the next generation. It was Aemond and or Lucerys that interrupted the likely reconciliation between these mothers. The son's behavior I lay at the feet of the mothers. Alicent slightly more than Rhaenyra, which is the reason Alicent is higher on this list. Number 3. Viserys Targaryen. Yep, number 3. Probably unpopular, but that's for everyone else to argue down in the comments. Who is not currently on horseback? Viserys just may be my favorite character, which is likely why he isn't higher on this list, I will admit. He's the Jon Snow of House of the Dragon, just naive beyond belief. Just look at how happy he is. Where to begin? He believed in a fairy tale passed on generation to generation, even when his vision of a son by Aemma didn't work out too well. Likely, he killed the love of his life to produce an heir, because his daughter, for some reason, just wasn't good enough. He prematurely declared his daughter as the heir, simply to spite his brother, who made an allegedly offhanded and ill-timed comment about his proposed heir Viserys was so desperately to replace. Placed the weight of the world on his daughter's shoulders. knowingly and forced her to marry into a relationship that would not likely produce an heir. When confronted with a solution for his succession headache, Viserys refused to marry Daemon to Rhaenyra. Daemon offered him a perfect solution. Without as much as consulting his daughter, he would rather marry his daughter off to a random lord and pray that after his death his grandchildren would change their name back to Targaryen, a problem that would have been solved by simply marrying Daemon to Rhaenyra, just ignoring the fact that Daemon was already married. Not difficult to overcome, as Daemon testified. The complete lack of spine when dealing with Aemond's eye incident. There's a simple solution. The penalty for questioning the prince's legitimacy is death. He could simply condemn Aemond, his son, to death, and after a few seconds, commute the sentence to the loss of a single eye. Alicent cannot argue the justice in a commuted sentence, and would likely be grateful that Viserys spared their son's life. Another possible positive conclusion to an unfortunate event. Why is he not higher on this list? Simple. He kept his word, and never hinted that he would retract his commitment to his daughter. That is commendable. In the end, he just wanted peace, for the realm and for his family. Unfortunately, that was not possible, for no better reason than Viserys himself.
Will have your tongue for that.
Number 2. Larys Strong. This may be an unpopular choice. The reason he is so high on this list is that his actions were always his own, for his own reasons. Never was he influenced or manipulated by others. His reveal of Rhaenyra's indiscretion to Alicent served no purpose, but to turn sister against sister and bring strife into the house. The execution of his father and brother during the arson of Harrenhal robbed Rhaenyra of a powerful ally in Harwin, but more importantly, it provided a vacancy at the most powerful position and allowed a snake to return to the Red Keep, resulting in number 1. Otto Hightower. Yes, well said. I doubt there is much needed to defend this choice, but I will in the interest of thoroughness. Otto's distaste of Daemon needed little explanation, but the primary reason is likely Otto had a much more difficult time controlling Daemon, and by extension, Viserys. Divide and conquer, a tactic as old as time. Once rid of Daemon, Otto planted his own daughter to take advantage of Viserys' grief. I believe Aemma's death haunted Viserys until the day he died, and he would not likely have been agreeable in remarrying if not for Otto's interference. Otto's manipulation of Alicent in believing Rhaenyra would likely murder her children, Otto's spying of Rhaenyra, and reporting of hearsay as fact all the way to the king's ears. The only significant successful resistance to Otto was Rhaenyra herself. However, Rhaenyra had to agree to marry Laenor to rid herself of Otto's presence, which created an entirely new set of problems. Again, all due to the treachery and treason of the self-serving hand of the king. And that should wrap up our House of the Dragon discussion. If you're new to the channel, most other videos are a complete rewrite of Season 8 of Game of Thrones, so check it out if you're interested. Season 9 will be slowly released over the coming weeks, and we'll see you then.